Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Bradbury and my experiment is on the acorn woodpeckers, also known as Melanerpes formicivorus. These birds are a clown-faced bird with a black and white face and a red crown. They are found in the woodland regions of California, Oregon, Arizona, Mexico, Central America, and the northern regions of South America. They live within oak trees, pine trees, and sycamore trees. Their diet consists of insects and tree sap during the spring and stored acorns during the winter. Also, they are known to cooperate in parental care of their offspring. In my experiment, the question I posed was, are acorn woodpeckers a community-based species that live in groups? I hypothesized that acorn woodpeckers are in fact a community-based species that live in groups and work together in order to survive. The location of my experiment was at Sycamore Grove Park in Livermore, California. I maintained a mobile observation position, meaning that I was not seated for the experiment. I was actually on foot, positioned in between multiple trees. I observed and recorded their movements and behaviors, primarily focusing on flying, landing, pecking wood, and relocating its position in a tree. I split each behavior into two categories, whether if it was alone or with another woodpecker. Also, I tallied how many times the behavior occurred. In addition to this, I recorded the number of birds seen in each grouping, and I listened and identified calls and recorded the behavior that followed each call. When the call and the corresponding behavior occurred, then I would tally again. I labeled each call A, call B, etc. Next, let's talk about my results. So in table 1, it shows the number of times an acorn woodpecker was flying alone versus with another bird. They flew alone 66 times and flew with another bird 50 times. Table 2 shows the number of times an acorn woodpecker landed alone versus with another acorn woodpecker. The difference in these values is a lot different than in table 1. The birds landed alone 25 times while landing next to another woodpecker 85 times. Table 3 shows the number of birds that I found in each group. The group size ranged from 2 birds to 8 birds. I also recorded the frequency, meaning how many times I saw this group. Figure 1 is a graph representation of the values in table 3 in order to show the spread. And as you can obviously see, groups of 3 were the most frequently found group. Table 4 shows the frequency of acorn woodpecker calls. Call A represents a loud waka, while call B represents a soft waka. I was only able to identify these two calls. After call A, the birds followed the call and flew towards the calling bird. This occurred 26 times. After call B, the birds flew out of the tree and relocated back into a different position within the same tree, and this occurred 12 times. And this is actually what their calls sound like. Table 5 shows the woodpecking frequency of the acorn woodpeckers. They were pecking wood alone 7 times, but they were also seen pecking wood while sharing the branch with another woodpecker 11 times. And in table 6, we see the number of times an acorn woodpecker relocates its position. And this is separate from the information in table 4, because that was in response to a call. This is just relocating its position in general. There were 20 instances in which an acorn woodpecker relocated its position in a tree, but remained within its group. And there was only one instance where a woodpecker relocated its position and left its initial group. Now that I've shared my results, let's kind of get into how I interpreted them. So the acorn woodpeckers actually flew alone more times than flying with another woodpecker. However, that's still 50 instances in which they had to fly together. And this indicates that there's a level of communication, coordination, and cooperation between the birds that was present. Also, many of the birds that were flying alone actually landed next to another acorn woodpecker, which still exhibits a social behavior. To build on top of that, the acorn woodpeckers actually landed next to other birds at a significantly higher rate than landing alone, which proves that they are in fact a social species. And this suggests that the woodpeckers preferred to be around other members of its species than by itself. Like I previously mentioned, I found the acorn woodpeckers in groups from 2 to 8, and these groups were constantly changing due to their rapid relocation and flying from tree to tree. However, I rarely saw the woodpeckers actually stay alone. For the woodpeckers that were alone, they only remained so for a brief amount of time and later flew towards other acorn woodpeckers. Also, they had a preference to stay within their group because, like I said, all but one bird actually stayed in their group while readjusting their position within a tree, which further emphasizes the idea that they are typically in groups and shows the social behavior that these acorn woodpeckers have. And again, I was only able to identify 2 calls, but for call A, I interpreted it as a signal calling birds from other trees to join their group, and call B as a communication within the actual group it came from. And this is based off the behaviors that followed each of these calls. And the significance of this is that they actually responded to each other's calls, listened, and really interacted with one another by following whatever the call was signaling. They didn't really show signs of aggression and continued to fly towards the other woodpeckers, suggesting that they communicate often and can recognize each other's calls and are familiar with these birds. The waka call that I heard is actually the most common call of the acorn woodpeckers. And although it's heard in multiple contexts, it's most often used as an affiliative display, which further indicates that these woodpeckers were actually probably a part of the same group. And their interactive nature that the acorn woodpeckers displayed can actually be translated into other tasks because they already show signs of cooperation and responding to others' calls. And this ability can be applied to the group setting in which they divide up tasks. So the acorn woodpeckers are actually known to delegate reproductive tasks. They have co-breeders and non-breeding helpers. The co-breeders are a group of few birds that breed amongst each other, while the helpers are non-breeders that primarily focus on caring for the offspring and providing provisional behaviors. And this shows that they can effectively communicate and understand each individual bird's role. And I believe that the ability to delegate roles, properly follow them, and complete them actually shows a level of connectedness that are seen among members of a group. In regards to drilling holes and pecking wood, I actually observed some woodpeckers that were drilling holes by themselves, while others were drilling holes while sharing the branch with other acorn woodpeckers. And the purpose of drilling holes is actually to create granaries that store acorns, as you can see in the photo. And these acorns are a vital source of food during the winter when there's a less abundance of insects. And from my observations, the woodpeckers did not attempt to defend their granaries from other woodpeckers, and they did not become territorial as other woodpeckers approached and landed next to them on the same branch. In fact, I even cited a few instances where multiple woodpeckers were pecking the same area. This suggests that the woodpeckers were not competing against each other for food storage and were even working together at some points. The lack of competition and evidence of cooperation indicates that they were a part of the same group because, again, they're sharing their food storage. In conclusion, I do believe that acorn woodpeckers are in fact a community-oriented species that live in groups. Throughout the duration of my observation, I noticed that They were primarily with other members of their species and rarely alone. They even responded to each other's calls without aggression and shared their food storage areas. Any questions?